Can you hear me?
Yeah, hi Mark. How's it going?
I did not expect the bear. That's awesome.
You're the only person who knows what I really look like now.
Uh-huh. It's great.
Can you boost your volume a little bit?
Oh, really? My gain's not that high? Hang on one second. Let's try this. Second. How about now? Better,
Yeah,
better?
that's better.
Okay.
So
Because
how's it going?
good. I just got off a Zoom call. If you think I'm too quiet, I can reset it.
So I think welcome to Mindshock. You, Mark Sargent, are actually the first official flat earther that I've talked to.
Really? Because
Yeah,
I've watched a lot of stuff, and you know what? You're right. I don't think I've seen you talk to anybody.
so I've had a number of people on. I had a Mensa member, a former Mensa member on, and he's not a flat earther per se,
Hmm.
but he was smart enough to kind of like me. He didn't really take a position. He actually wasn't even that shocked if it would turn out to be true. He wasn't a flat earther, but I don't know if you heard that
I
episode.
did I did not hear that one. That sounds intriguing.
Yeah, it's a really old one, and he wasn't too familiar with flat Earth theory, so most of what I was saying was new to him.
Hmm.
And if you want to hear an interview, um, I think Nathan Oakley actually went over it on his podcast,
Oh,
and
okay.
yeah, he did take the opportunity to trash me a little bit in that one. But
Nathan Oakley trashes everybody.
yeah,
That's what he does. That's
well,
what he does.
in all fairness, I kind of trashed him too in the logical analysis he did with David Whitehead, which was actually really disappointing if you're familiar with Whitehead.
Probably not by name, but go ahead.
He did the Unslaved podcast years ago. Really sharp guy,
Yeah.
all about conspiracies as well as the occult. So I was really surprised at how hard a anti-flat Earth stance he took, given he is so anti-establishment. I was really shocked, especially because of his occult, like all of his occult spiritual knowledge,
Yeah.
where because all the ancients obviously had flat Earth cosmology. So obviously, I wasn't expecting him to believe in flat Earth, but I wasn't expecting him to behave like, your standard triggered, authority worshiping cultist, as I call them. They just worship authorities. So
Right.
it was a little shocking, but Nathan Oakley actually what I went over in that podcast was how Oakley's really good at the advanced fallacies, but
Yeah.
he actually he commits a lot of really basic ones. So it was interesting.
Huh. Yeah, I will check it out. Send me a link if you have one after the show, and
I'll email you. But the
I'd be happy
Mensa
to.
member was curious because this guy, one of the only guys I've ever talked to with basically no ego, no hubris. And when we were going over just how it would affect the world, and how most so-called credentialed individuals and scientists, etc., they can't, they're too mentally weak to even consider the possibility.
Yeah.
His response to that was, it could be a new beginning, which I thought was really interesting because, and this was the first time he had ever had a real flat earth conversation, but I'll send you the link. It's pretty
Yeah,
interesting.
please do.
But
Please do.
I had a few other people on that also didn't necessarily go take an anti-flat earth stance, but they weren't flat earthers like you. You're a flat earther, correct?
Yeah, oh yeah.
So you're a
You could,
hundred percent you're 100% certain in the model.
yep. I'm all in. Absolutely.
Okay. So just real quick, is there anything you don't want me to touch upon in the interview?
No. No,
It's
everything's
anything goes.
fair game. I never, in fact, when people want to talk to me, I say, and they say, "Oh, can we send you some advanced questions?" I go, "Don't even bother. I'd rather get them cold."
Yeah, I just want to make sure that there's nothing you're uncomfortable with discussing on
Oh
any
no, no,
topic.
no. What, did all of a sudden develop a facial tick and start. It's like, oh my God, the helicopters, can't you hear them? No. No.
Okay, I'm gonna ask you the first question that I've been dying to ask you
Yeah.
ever since you showed up in the Mindshock chat all that time ago.
Yeah.
It's a really important question. Everybody's
Uh-oh.
gonna be shocked at this question. As far as nicknames, does anybody call you Marky Mark?
They do. They do. And it's
Really?
funny. It's funny. Okay, first off, thank you. You're the first person to actually ask me that formally. There is a chat group in chat or in Skype called Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch, created by some of the what can now be considered the early circles of Flat Earth. Karen B would be in there, Zulu One, Carly Sunshine, and others. And yeah, they created that. I am older than that, so it doesn't bother me. I mean, yes, I knew of Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch, one of the early boy bands. And I was not a huge boy band fan, but I don't loathe them to the point where, all of a sudden I get triggered and just, want to start a bar fight because of it. But no, I've never. Yes, people have called me growing up, of course, once the band came out, I hear that every once in a while, but it's too easy. Most people will make fun of my last name more than my first name because my last name's Sargent.
Do
And
they
so
call
I
you
get
Sarge?
yeah, oh God, constantly. Absolutely freaking constantly. And I was actually glad that I did not go military. Because my father during the Vietnam War was a first sergeant in the Air Force because he wanted to make sure to stay away as far as possible. So Air Force Reserve over here in California. And so
Wait,
when he
wait,
had to
wait.
answer,
So he was Sergeant.
yep. And I don't think he thought that far ahead because when you answer the phone like that, because he had a desk job, you had to answer it that way. Yeah, for Sergeant. And he got in trouble so often because they didn't understand.
Yeah.
It's like, no, no, it's spelled different. It's
Oh, they thought
phonetic.
he was they thought he was joking.
Yeah, they thought
Yeah.
he was screwing with them, and so he got, this like you have to explain it all the time. It's like, no, my
Wow.
last name is Sargent, and spell it out. It's like somebody should have gone to him and said, dude, you probably not a good idea to do the military.
So I was saving this question for a little later, but we might as well get into it now
Yeah,
because I don't just want to ask you if what you think of people calling you and others a shill.
yeah.
Because one of my questions was actually going to be, if you don't mind answering, the profession of your parents. And I actually didn't know that your father was a military man, but that's going to give them more ammunition
No,
because,
no, no. Only during Vietnam. His official position, what's kind of weird. He was a corporate recruiter in the 70s, and then he was a corporate hatchet man in the 80s, which meant he fired people. He was the guy you did not. I felt bad for him because you didn't want to go to lunch with him. If he invited you out to
yeah,
lunch, you didn't want to go. But he was a corporate recruiter in the 70s. He was also a mediator. He had a number of different jobs. He'd mediate disputes between labor and management, like unions and management and stuff like that. But no, the military thing was strictly Vietnam, which
okay,
was, if you knew the rules back then, which was, there was a draft. And
yeah.
so if you were going to go in, you wanted to enlist and then position yourself away from the front lines if possible. You did not want to wait until the draft because you were going infantry. And it's like he had heard from his friends, like, oh no, no, Air Force, Reserve, stationed somewhere in the States, you're gonna be fine.
So, to
So
your knowledge, no CIA involvement of any kind.
no, no, no. Neither of my parents were involved. My mother was a career teacher.
Okay.
My grandfathers, neither of them. My grandfather on my mother's side was a career accountant. Now, and I said actually one of my speeches I did at Flattoberfest a couple of years ago. I told people I go look, there was something really weird that yes, both of my grandparents my grandfathers were Masons, but neither was a 33rd. In fact, one was a Templar and the other was the Prairie of Sion, which meant they were on other sides of the fence. And but what was odd was they knew each other. In fact, we didn't know until years later, until one of them had already died, that they were pen pals before they were even married, which was so odd. That I've still got the letter where they knew each other, and yet neither side of the family knew this until that letter came out. which was you'd think it'd come up like during the wedding rehearsal dinner, right? If you these guys were pen pals and they lived within 20 minutes of each other in Seattle during the World War era, why would they allow their firstborn kids to get married? Right? It's without telling them. It's like, oh yeah, by the way, was it an arranged marriage? No, because you would have told the kids. Oh, you would have thought. But anyway, it was strange. Sorry, keep going with your thing
Yeah,
though.
that was
Nope.
actually a very interesting answer because you actually shocked my mind a little bit. So you're openly admitting both of your grandfathers are Masons.
Yeah, were
So
they're both deceased now, but yes.
yeah, so that's interesting because I don't know how all of the anti-flat earthers or the people within the flat earth community could just call everybody shills because there's a lot of that.
Right.
There's a lot of that.
Yeah.
Would you, if you were a shill, would you openly admit that? I don't know. I've never
No,
heard
no,
anybody else do it.
no, and let me clarify something. The shill thing again for anyone listening that don't even know what shill is. Most people don't even, they're too lazy to even look it up. The root of that is shillabur, which is a carney's, you know what a carney is. A carnival guy, a lead's assistant. And it goes it's a grift as old as time, which is most people know it even outside of the carnival, which would be like three card Monte, if you've ever seen that being played on the street,
Yeah,
find the queen or find the
yeah,
ball.
yeah.
The shill is the guy that's silently working in the crowd to get the crowd excited about playing. The guy would be like, "Oh yeah, I won $20 off this guy. I found the queen just like that." That's what a shill does. A shill is the secret guy in the audience that's working with the guy on stage. And but the reason why I was called a shill for it wasn't because I was doing anything shilly, even though I think that's really a word. It was mostly because of one guy, and you know who it is. I mean, you know the name, which is Eric Dubay, which was back in the day. And in fact, Matt Boylan collaborated with him. I still got the emails from Matt, where when the three of us were doing this stuff back in early 2015, Matt reached out to me and said, "Look, Eric and I are going to go a certain way. You need to go with us, or you know what, you're either with us or against us." And that's when those two actually had a very brief alliance, and it never let up. Eric does never likes sharing the stage with anybody, and everybody else is, again, if you're either with him entirely or you're against him. And I mean, I wasn't the first. I mean, I could send you a link after the show. He still has his enemies list on the IFERS page, which is the International Flat Earth Research Society, which is I'm number one with a bullet. Why? I'm one of the
That's
nicest
funny.
guys. Yeah. So yeah, it's Eric Dubay.
So,
So no, never been
ha
I've never worked for a government agency unless I'm like a monarch thing. But then what do you do?
well, I think one of the reasons this was immediately jumped to my mind when people are calling you a shill,
Yeah.
because you seem a little too good at media.
There you go. But that was mostly because of all the tech support, the phone work. I did thousands and thousands of hours of text phone support way before chat rooms were even a thing, back in the 90s and early 2000s. I was doing high level tech support for um, time and attendance software companies. And so I was and I was good at it. So on top of it, I mean, it helps when you're somewhat articulate. So I was doing the high stress calls, where people are crying on the other of the phone, and you had lawyers on the other of the phone, and hell, there was even a like a hitman on the other end of the phone. He was like, "I want to fly out there and take care of things." It's like, dude, what are you gonna do?
What?
Really, you're gonna fly to this software company and start whacking people? Um, you do that enough, and eventually you get comfortable with just about every type of person you can. You
Well,
can.
also, I have another theory too, because you're from, I don't know how to pronounce it, Wimbly Island.
No, it's Whidbey. It's northwest. In fact, you can see Canada right up the road from here. It's Whidbey, named
Is there
after
is
a
there a Wibbly or is there's only a Widley?
Whidbey,
Widby.
Whidbey. So think of would be, only spell it different.
Widby. Yeah.
Whidbey,
And
Whidbey.
there's no other island next to it with a similar name.
Nope.
I'm just making sure because I heard another person from that island, not on a flat earth podcast. It was some random podcast.
Yeah.
And it seems like there's a lot of really nice people on this island.
Sure.
Because this individual was super nice, like beyond Southern comfort type nice, Southern hospitality type nice. And I'm like, maybe that has something to do with it. And
With me constantly. And by the way, if I was a shill, I would, yeah, I mean, to your point, I have gotten to do a lot. I've had opportunities that other people haven't, to be sure. But at the same time, my social media presence has been restricted on levels that are beyond coincidence. Way, way beyond coincidence, to where, I mean, the whole community, to be sure. And in some ways, that's actually good, because people have asked me also, they said, "Oh, do you think anybody, if not you, is there anybody in the community that is a shill?" And I go, "No." And you want to know how I know this? Because there's been no breakouts, meaning our biggest, and I said this in the speech I did back in Vegas, which was our biggest subscriber person would be ODD, right? ODD Reality. And he's sitting at what, 300K, right? If anyone all of a sudden jumped out in front, and whether they bought them or they were assigned them, got a million subs, everyone would just start, squinting at them. Like, okay, who the hell are you? Everything's been very, very organic. Yes, I've gotten, but I've like, my channel isn't the biggest by any stretch. Not even close. I haven't gotten to do all sorts of things, but I've also gotten to do things that other people haven't. So I get it. People,
well, to me, the only thing that was a little tiny bit suspicious to me was your last name. But other than that,
really? That's it?
pretty much, because you said you played video games, so
Yeah,
that kind of, and you were really into conspiracies, and you did tech support. So that, to me, and now that you actually revealed that your grandfathers were Masons,
yeah.
that's, unless you're playing 4D chess here to try to appear not to be a
No.
But are you aware? So I did do a deep dive into Eric Dubay. Are you
Yeah.
aware that he's from the Langley, Virginia area, and both of his parents are employed with government contracted companies or were in the past?
I was not aware of some of that, but it doesn't surprise me. I think I knew about the Langley thing, and which is funny, because technically, if you wrote me a letter right now and put it in the mail, I am living in Langley, Washington. So I'm living in Langley, WA. He's used to live in Langley, VA. And
That's
by the way,
funny.
yeah, and Langley is, by the way, a fairly common name. Like, there's a Langley, British Columbia, not even 40 miles from here, maybe 50 miles from here. But at the same time, yeah, I get it. Eric, I don't consider him really, again, that suspicious. Has he been somewhat destructive? But come on, I've known people in the music industry and the people in the sound and stage industry. It's a very old tale, right? Where the actors hate each other, musicians hate each other. As soon as, like, if you're at a bunch of garage bands and you know each other, the first garage band that signs a deal, a record deal, they're immediately sellouts, right? It used to
Yeah,
be about the music, man. And that's what, I mean, I caught a lot. Well, I caught some hell with the commercial, to be sure. And I also caught hell for the documentary. And
yeah.
I don't blame people for it, but at the same time, it's like, look, what's the saying that I love so much? A rising tide raises all boats. Which is like, look, it helped the community. There was so much exposure because of the documentary. And yeah, I knew the
Yeah.
community was going to hate
Well,
it. And
anybody who knows anything about editing, obviously that wouldn't be a reason to think you're a shill. Anybody who knows anything about editing. So to
yeah,
me, that was nothing. But with Eric Dubay,
yeah,
I don't know. When you and your whole family are from Langley, Virginia,
yeah.
and there were guys, I forgot the guy's name. He did a huge deep dive into Dubay. And keep in mind, I actually don't know if this guy was or wasn't a flat earther. But
Right.
he did a ton of research. He pulled up all the personnel records, everybody's LinkedIn, and both of his parents apparently worked or still work for government companies.
Huh? I mean,
And
I think you might be right there, because his parents may have helped him. If you know some of the backstory, the reason why he was in Thailand was because he jumped in at the last minute on a medical class action lawsuit back in the 90s, I
oh, I didn't
believe.
know this.
Yeah. And he won, I think, six figures, like 100, 120 grand, right? And so, like with some people, he was like, oh, hey, where can I go that 120 grand is going to take me a long way?
Yeah.
Thailand. And it's true. I mean, freaking, that is where you, if you can pull off, the language and it's like, okay, so he teaches, yoga and martial arts over there. And one of my favorite stories about him was it wasn't even about him. It was what Owen Benjamin talked about him. And Owen Benjamin just came up with this on the fly. Sharp guy sometimes. And he said because Owen Benjamin used to be about the whole Hollywood LA scene. He dated
I actually remember him from Hollywood. Like I remember way back in the
Oh yeah.
day,
He
he was semi-famous.
yeah, he was a B-list,
Yeah.
but he dated Christina Ricci, which of all people, it's like wow.
I didn't even know that, but wow.
Yeah, and so he used to go all the Hollywood parties. And what he said was when you go to these Hollywood parties, they all played out sort of the same. And eventually you run to a party where they talk about there'll all be these whispers about some guy at the back of the party doling out sage-like wisdom, right? Like an Andy Warhol wannabe. And he just made up a name. He goes, let's just call him Savanye, right? Which is a great name. And it's like he goes, Eric Dubay is like Savanye to me. He goes, I hear about this guy all the freaking time, right? It's like, oh, Eric Dubay does this and there, because again, he's got that myth about him, which is, oh, he lives in Thailand, he teaches martial arts and yoga, sometimes he raps, and he just doles out truth. And Eric really milks it to where now people they don't even know he's more legend than anything else. With me, I try to get everything up front, which is why my very first Strange World episode, because I do have a criminal past, no question, and I'm not shy about telling people. It is if you want to listen to a fun story, Strange World number one is called Fireworks, where I made illegal fireworks
Oh, I
during.
remember you. I don't think it was I must have it must have been some interview that I heard because I do remember you mentioning this story on an interview.
I brought it up a couple times, but I
Yeah.
laid out my first Strange World episode. I had three glasses of wine, had a co-host because I wasn't brave, and 9 years ago, and told the story at length, and just laid out the whole story. It takes about 2 hours to tell the story, because there's a lot of Native American reservations up here in Washington, and they sell, the rules for reservations are different, right? And
Yeah.
taxes. Yeah, we did some things to the Native Americans, so we're just gonna let them do whatever they want
Yeah.
and sell fireworks under the table. They still can't sell legal fireworks above the table, but below the table they can. And somebody's got to make it for them. And I was pretty good at chemistry, so I made them a whole bunch of stuff, and I got hit for it. The ATF hit me years ago, decades ago now. And because of that, I wanted full disclosure. Because of what you just said there, I did not want anyone doing a deep dive into my past and saying, "Did you know Mark was a federal criminal?" It's like, yeah, yes, yes, I was. But they waited to hit me until
But
I
wait
was
a second.
21. What?
Wouldn't that make you less likely to be a shit?
I would think so. Well, unless you went the other way and said, well, when they hit him, they cut it, do the whole TV movie thing. It's like, well, they cut
Wait,
him a
when yeah,
deal.
but what year was this? When
Oh,
you
this was 91.
Yeah, that's too yeah, but that doesn't if it was right before you started your flat earth clues, then yes.
There you go.
But when
Yeah, but
it's
they wouldn't have waited
yeah.
that long. Yeah. If you
So
wanted to
but
use
just
me,
one
yeah,
more thing about Eric Dubay though.
yeah,
He seems like his speech pattern is very unusual. Some would say, because I've done quite a bit of research into MK Ultra,
right,
and that's a deep rabbit hole.
right.
And some would say he speaks like someone who has been programmed. And on the second point, his video animations are a little too good, aren't they? Like when he first came out with his flat Earth videos,
Yeah.
and he had all of these renderings of how just perspective renderings, even the rotation of the stars, like they are a little too good
They were
just based
very
on a random guy on YouTube.
they were very polished considering how early it was because he didn't have that many subs when,
Yeah,
back in the day. Now, nowadays, because you can't stop him from getting 250,000 subs. You can burn down his channel. His channel's been torched two or three times, and they
yeah.
just keep coming back. In fact, I even ran into a guy on the island who clocked me, and it's like he saw me, he came up to me, he wanted to shake my hand, but he was open. He goes, just so you know, I hate to say this, but I said bad things about you in chat and comment section. I go, why? He goes, well, because I'm an Eric Dubé guy. It's like, get out of here. Are you serious? But the only thing that ever made me suspicious about Eric ever, the only thing that ever did it, was when the infamous interview. If you've never watched it, it's worth it. When Eddie Bravo interviewed him years ago before the very first Flat Earth conference in 2017. And there was this moment where, because Eddie was a big fan of Savanye.
Yeah.
Oh, he was like buying into it. It's like, oh, Eric knows the truth, brother. Right. And it's like now it's like David Weiss knows the truth, brother. He's switched. Right. And he said, hey, I'm going to be out on the islands, a nearby island, doing a judo thing or whatever martial arts thing. Cause he teaches classes wherever he wants to go. And you're in a kind of martial arts. He goes, hey, how would you like to come out? I'll give you passes and everything. You can come out and hang out with me. And Eric, for whatever reason, this goes into the whole programming thing. Eric, for whatever reason, just said, no, no, I don't think. I mean, what, you'd think you just be nice. It's like, oh yeah, that'd be kind of fun. Send me some information, or
Yeah.
like blow them off quietly. But to say straight up no in 5 seconds on a live podcast is like, wow, really? You're gonna shut down
That's a little weird. Yeah.
one of your big fans. So people would then speculate it's like maybe he can't leave Thailand, because maybe he's got passport problems. Because if you leave the United States for more than 6 months without coming back, you got to deal with some extra
Oh,
paperwork and crap.
right, right, right.
So
Yeah.
maybe there was something out there that was keeping him in Thailand to where he couldn't leave. But I don't know.
Well, I have a list. Let me just recap the list for the listeners.
Yeah,
So, from Langley, Virginia, family from Langley, Virginia, working in government contracted companies.
yeah.
Very unusual speech pattern. Um, Animations that seem like they have an entire production team behind them.
Mhm.
And there's actually another point. He did at least one or two videos where he's in drag, which a lot of people think is satanic. So, especially in Hollywood, there's all these satanic connections to
Yeah, yeah.
to inverting the genders and all of that. So that's a pretty long list of suspicions.
It's pretty good. The drag thing though, I can tell you, I know why he did the drag thing because he was doing a bad parody of Patricia Steer. He hated Patricia Steer because Patricia had when she first came out, she had massive production value. She was ridiculously attractive, and she had camera savvy, and she had already done radio work. Every producer that I ever worked with that met her or talked to her at any point said she was the most camera ready person they've ever seen in any type of community like this. And so it bothered Eric. Eric couldn't compete with that. Couldn't even touch that. But to your other points, yeah, yeah, you make some good points. Eric had it didn't matter too much to me because well, okay, two points real quick. One, if you're gonna be a shill eventually, 'cause remember, I've been doing this for 9 years and Eric's been doing it for over 10 years. Eventually you're going to go off road and steer the movement into another direction or renounce it, right? It's like, oh no, I was wrong, and then you create huge disharmony in the community, and who knows what happens after that.
Well,
um Go
are
ahead.
you familiar with my theory? I say this on every flat earth topic that I cover, every podcast where I cover the topic,
Hmm.
which is because to me, apparently I'm a unique guy. I'm more fascinated by the argumentation than the conclusion.
Yeah,
I
I
want
like
to,
listening to your stuff.
yeah, I care about the logical uh argumentation because who cares if you're accidentally correct? Like, there's plenty of stupid people who accidentally hold correct opinions.
Yeah,
That's not relevant. That doesn't make them smart. They just accidentally latched on to whatever they heard.
sure.
So
Well,
with Dubé, just the final point on Dubé.
yeah,
Also, he had seemingly he has quite a lot of access to information that when he was unloading it, especially Atlantis, because I've studied Atlantis for decades.
right.
He had information that was not on the internet at that time. Like his whole blog, Atlantean Conspiracy. I don't know if you know, I think that's what it was called. He
Yeah,
had
yeah, yeah.
information on there. Like I have a pretty large library. They were in these old, obscure Atlantean books that nobody had put online yet. So maybe Eric Dubé really is an organic occult scholar, maybe. But
Maybe.
the other issue is in some of the interviews, he does not seem as eloquent and informed as on the pre-recorded videos that he did on YouTube, as if he was reading from a script with
Hmm.
information, insider information, so to speak.
Hmm.
So that's kind of where I look at it. And again, just to clarify for all the listeners,
Yeah.
that does not mean that the information he's bringing forth is false. Because if this is what fascinated me the most about the flat earth topic. I don't know if you heard my podcast on my history with geocentrism, because I've been studying geocentrism since 2000.
Okay.
And I mention this all the time. I do not have this backed up. I used to back up everything, and I got in trouble with YouTube because I showed images of the occult NASA patches from their top secret missions. And my
Really?
entire stream got affected, and since then it's been nonstop glitches. This was maybe 5 months ago,
Hmm.
and it's just been glitch. That's one of the reasons it's taken me so long to finally do this interview with you, because it's been nonstop glitches. And again, we even got this. I mean, I think that was just the power issue. I'm not gonna get conspiratorial and say we're being interfered with, but and this
Right.
isn't live on YouTube, so it shouldn't be. I don't think it should be an
Yeah, it
issue.
shouldn't be that much of a problem. Live is different, but this shouldn't be an issue
Yeah, well, I'm
unless they're
also
just
really
having.
paranoid. I actually had a computer engineer help me with all of this hardware to bypass. I can't go, I don't want to go into it too much because I don't want the
Oh, no, 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 no,
information
you're fine. You're
on
fine. Go ahead.
YouTube. Because when I put this on YouTube, I don't want them to kind of like just shut down my whole account because they think, there's a way to circumvent. I can't really say too much, but
Right.
there are computer engineers that have all this hardware equipment to bypass YouTube server algorithms.
Hmm.
And so I saved all these. There were a bunch of websites. You remember GeoCities from the 90s.
Sure.
There were people posting. Like, there was free speech back then, so you can post any conspiracy you want. And there were by the year 2000, I forgot the forum. There was a physics forum where over 200 current physics professors were geocentrists.
Nice.
And we had nobody was talking about flat Earth at that time, but they were talking geocentrism seriously
Yeah.
because they were actually applying the scientific method, and they were saying this doesn't make sense with the celestial observation.
Right.
So that's another thing that kind of made me unique, because when flat Earth got rolled out, I didn't immediately go, oh, that's super stupid. I'm like, geocentrism, there's a lot there. And I've been studying Tesla and Einstein forever. So I'm already familiar with the bunk of relativity, how it's
Right.
bunk.
Right.
So for me, like all the talking points of all these people defending the globe, they've already been debunked, and it has nothing to do with flat Earth. That's just geocentrism and relativity being debunked. Most people don't know about that stuff. And one of the things I talk about on my podcast all the time is scientism as opposed to science. And this is why, like Neil deGrasse, like my main criticism of guys like Neil deGrasse Tyson and any scientist in the mainstream, they never once uttered the word scientism. If they were legitimate scientists, they would be warning of the dangers of scientism. Like, look at any religion, like even Christianity, like so-called true Christians, they warn of the false teachers and the charlatans, like because they truly believe what they're saying.
Yeah.
With these guys, like, how could Neil deGrasse Tyson not be a show? Or you could
Well,
say he's
yeah.
just really dumb.
No, 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 no. You're absolutely right, and you're that is a well-made point, which is science rarely, if ever, publicly goes against its own. Behind the scenes, you'll have scientists quibbling over, this and that. There's some famous stories about that. But when it comes to Neil Tyson, I think he's a shill only in that he is given scripts to read and he's given positions to fill, but they don't give him the backstory of why he's doing it. Meaning, it's better to have Neil be authentic in his delivery because I will give this, he is a great salesman and he has amazing stage presence. He could do anything along those lines. He could do self-help books. he could do corporate presentations. It's just blind freaking luck or whatever you want to call it that he is in physics that he's doing it because from the science standpoint, and I don't ever wish him, to trip and fall on like 5 or 6 bullets. But if he did, he doesn't have an understudy. Meaning there's nobody to take his place. There's only three media scientists in the world that are rolled out in front of the camera, and I'm not counting Bill Nye because he's not. Neil Tyson, Michio Kaku from Japan, and Brian Cox from the UK. But yes, Neil, he actually sometimes he helps us more than he hurts us, especially with the comments you're well versed in with like with that presentation where he was criticizing Felix Baumgartner and the
Oh
Red
yeah,
Bull
yeah,
jump.
yeah.
It was a great one. Great one. It's like, yeah, that he should have never gone down that road because we use that term all the time, or when he
Well,
says that it's pear-shaped. Go ahead.
let me circle back to what I was saying before with my theory is that so it almost doesn't matter within this theory of shields, it doesn't matter whether flat earth is true or not, because similar to the way Alex Jones is just allowed to have a show and be anti-government, one of
Right.
the theories is to roll out the New World Order. You need to stir up more opposition to get the Civil War going. So
Yes.
if the goal is a new world order, regardless if flat earth is true or not, like we could say if it's true, they let the cat out of the bag. And that's why people think that Matt Towerland is a shield too, because he apparently worked for NASA. And or you're saying
But
he didn't?
I know it's taken me a while to piece that together, but I know what happened there. Um, Matt wasn't necessarily a shill. What he was in the right place at the right time. And even he didn't know, because again, if Matt's back, you want to have somebody do a deep dive. Do a deep dive on Matt. Fascinating, his freaking trajectory, which was, he's an artist. But we'll say this, I consider him a really good painter, out of Montreal, who also, but he wanted everything, right? He had a huge ego, and he wanted to be an actor, he wanted to be a singer, he wanted to be a comedian, and he had high confidence they could pull these things off. And so, he went down to Hollywood. Good looking guy, by the way, in the 20s. He was an actor. I mean, I saw him in bit part acting roles in Hollywood. He actually made it down there to Los Angeles. And I think at one point he made friends because of his painting circles. He made friends with one of the graphic guys at NASA. And the story goes, and you probably saw it on the documentary, some of this, which was I don't think he worked for NASA. He got his paychecks from NASA directly. I think he removed a degree of
Yeah,
separation,
yeah, yeah.
meaning he he painted he painted some stuff like a room at a NASA guy's house in the Hamptons. That's why he was there. And Matt is not a fast painter, really interesting painter. And, is again, that's another Savanier where he's painting all this stuff. It's going to take a while and he's going to charge X number of dollars. And whoever the NASA guy was fascinated with it. And it's like, oh, well, I'm not going to wait till this guy's done. I'm going to throw a party, with all my NASA mucky muck friends. And that's how the story goes, where it's like, hey, Matt, you should go too. You're a good looking painter. You're obviously going to be one of the more interesting guys in the room. And Matt, when everything's being laid out in front of him, which I love, it was the only coherent interview he ever did, and it was his girlfriend interviewing him sober on a Sunday morning, thank God. And seriously, it's the only sober thing I ever saw him do that wasn't drug fueled. And where he says, that when they drew, the UN map on the floor, where everything, and the guy was describing how energy worked and the thermal transfers and all this stuff, that he was looking at the UN flag and he didn't understand it, even again, it was like 25, 26 when this happened. For years, several years later, when it's like, it dawned on him, it's like, wait a minute, they weren't talking metaphorically. They were talking like it was real. And then he tried to make phone calls and no one was answering his call. And by that time, he was already going down a rabbit hole. Do I think he worked for NASA directly? No, no, I don't think he got his paycheck. But the story sounds better if he says that he worked
So
for NASA
let me,
directly.
I'm going to give you a mind shock. I've never told this story before on
Go
Mind
ahead.
Shock. I'm going to tell it right now with you.
Okay.
But so you believe that that story really happened? That
Out in the Hamptons,
yeah,
it's I think it happened because it is a great story. Meaning,
yeah.
if I was going to shoot it, if I was going to film it, oh, that is so easy to film. And
So
and it so go
here's the
ahead.
thing.
Yeah.
I actually heard that story told by somebody else before. Not exactly, but the story of NASA insiders. Um, I don't have a source for this,
Oh
unfortunately.
no,
I'm
go ahead.
actually,
Go ahead.
that's why I haven't told the story before, because I always bring the receipts. If you watch my 25-hour Steven Seagal podcast, I bring receipts for every single claim with
Okay.
with on everything. I don't have the receipts for the story, which is why I haven't told it, but I thought it was relevant to share.
Okay.
I'm not saying that he stole the story. Maybe it happened to him. But this story, it was around. I was trying to find it and I couldn't find it. It was, and again, I don't even know if the story's true, but the story as written with NASA insiders kind of laughing about the joke of the flat Earth. So I also I'm not 100% sure what the terminology used was. I don't
Sure.
remember. But that story, a very, very similar story existed on the internet before.
The question then becomes, again, comes down to date and timestamp. The first time Matt said it on camera would have been 2014, but the story itself, if you believe the story, would have happened late 90s, maybe
Okay, so
2001,
here's the next
2002.
question.
Yeah.
Did he tell people right after it happened
No,
and they put it online?
I can't imagine he would. Well, I mean, it's possible. I mean, again, if you can find a version of it,
Yeah.
possibly. I mean, he might have, but I don't think the reason why I don't think so is because I don't think, again, being a dumb painter, actor, kid that, in your mid 20s, I don't think he understood the story
Well,
until
so
years later
that's
when,
when I
go ahead.
first read it online, I didn't know what I was reading either because they didn't say flat Earth.
Hmm.
It was something like the world is not what you think it. It was that was the gist of it.
Yeah, and he didn't, and when he told the story, he didn't, well, he mentioned flat, but I don't think he said flatter directly when he talked
You know
about it.
what would be funny? I don't know if you still talk to him, but is it
Matt?
possible? Yeah.
Oh God, no. Matt hates me.
Oh, okay.
Matt doesn't call
I
me
don't
anymore.
know. I don't know all of the who's who or
That's
anything.
all right.
I
Yeah.
mostly just analyze the logic of the debates, but
Yeah.
uh, it would be interesting if he posted his own story anonymously, and that's the older one. That would be interesting.
And that is possible, except that Matt was not a social media guy early on. He was very hands-on, tactile paintings.
Yeah, I'll try to
But yeah,
track it
you can
down.
find it.
Yeah,
I'd love to sort that out. But do I think that this story is possibly true? I do because it is such a great spooky story,
yeah,
where you have basically unknown X-Files smoking man types
yeah,
walking around a party. When the power goes out, when the power goes out and they're down to candles and wine. And everyone knows if you've ever been at a party when it goes down to candles and wine, or even a bonfire and wine, people love telling stories. And the stories were crossing over between different groups in the aerospace industry, and everyone kept chiming in with more things, and it got spookier and spookier until finally one guy, started laying it all out, just like, okay, let's get closure on this, how this whole thing works. And it was very compelling, to where it was enough for me when I heard it in 2014 to start doing the research on my own. Again, thinking it's like, okay, it's a good story, but it's not true,
yeah.
right? There's no way the Earth could be flat, and therefore I'm going to disprove it, and then change my life forever and ruin everything. So yeah.
And to your point too, I actually knew someone who worked at NASA as a computer engineer.
Oh, did you?
And when you talk about compartmentalization, a lot of people don't understand that it's true. That person, because I asked them, and they had no opinion at all on flat Earth. I don't think they even considered it seriously, but they were honest. They were like, "We have no idea what this is used for. Like, we have a task, we execute our task,
Yeah.
and we deliver the task. We have no clue what anything is
Yeah.
outside of the task."
Compartmentalization is extremely powerful and very, very useful. People, I brought it up before, the Manhattan Project. Doesn't matter if you believe in nuclear weapons or not, which is the Manhattan Project went from inception to delivery and never leaked, right? That was six figures worth of people. and it never ever leaked. They wiped out cities, and no one secrets absolutely can be kept. Need to know, extremely powerful, which is why I reference Capricorn 1. That wonderful scene, which is so glossed over in that movie, where the young computer programmer who knew something was wrong, but again, he didn't know what. He just said, where he goes into the bar and he was telling Elliot Gould, his reporter friend, and he said, "There's no way the transmissions could have come from 70 miles away." Right? And as soon as he said that, right, all of a sudden a fake call comes to the bar because there were no cell phones when this movie was made back in 1978. Elliot Gould walks to the bar, walks to the bar. There's no one on the other end of the phone. He turns around to go back to the pool table where his friend is. His friend is gone. The drink's still on the pool table, and his friend has been erased from the rest of the movie. They got him out of there, and when he goes to his friend's house the next day to check on him, the apartment that he was living in, there's someone else living there, and all the magazines have the correct labels on them. Like this lady's been living there for years. It's like, what are you talking about? I was just here.
Yeah.
And she's like, get out of here. I'm going to call the police. Right. And by the time he got out of that apartment, they already clipped his brakes. They were trying to kill him.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, I mean, people
Well,
don't understand.
the other thing I touched upon too, a lot of people are saying, "Oh, well, there was no Photoshop during the moon landings." Like I went over the green screen technology used in the early 1900s. I mean, this is old technology. They
Right.
pretty much developed like the matte scanning and everything in the late 1890s.
Right.
So, and I even showed images from a few movies from the 20s and 30s where they used CG, like the precursor to
Right.
CGI.
Right. Yeah.
So the
Photos.
fakery, they've been doing fakery for a really long time.
Well, ever since there's been photos, it's the first
Yeah,
thing you do with photos. I'm going to blame women for a lot of it, which is the first thing you do is you touch up photos, right?
yeah.
That photo touch ups and photo editing has been there minute one, which is like, okay, well, we don't like how, what can we do to make this photo or movie look better?
Well,
And yeah, that
it actually goes even further because even presidents had touch-ups on their paintings and they
there you
even
go.
changed people's heads. It
Perfect.
was
Yeah.
for whatever reason, I call them the coincidence theorists as opposed to the conspiracy theorists because they believe all these things are coincidence. That's why I use that term so often because it gets people thinking. Like
Yeah.
you're calling somebody a conspiracy theorist because they're aware that criminals don't always act alone.
Right.
Criminal conspiracies prosecuted every day. I think you even mentioned that before too,
Oh yeah.
that it's prosecuted every day.
Yeah,
Every day.
but I was hit with it. I didn't even know it
Yeah.
existed. People think, oh, conspiracy is a bad word. It's like it's used in the court system all the time. If you're a bank robber, if you rob a bank today, you'll get hit with armed robbery. But if you rob a bank with two of your friends, you
Yeah.
get hit with bank robbery and conspiracy to
Yeah.
commit robbery, meaning you conspired with your friends. There are it drives me insane, and I know it's human nature, which is like everyone's got their own wheelhouse. If but there are conspiracies in every aspect of our lives all the time, in business and politics and sports and entertainment, and yes, in journalism and science. They're there all the time. It's just that most people don't want to. Well,
I would actually argue science actually has more conspiracies than any other field, not
sure.
less.
Sure. Well, hell, let me rattle off a couple for you really fast, which is because I love throwing it back at science. Like, okay, science never does anything wrong, right? Ever, and they don't want to admit it. I go, I don't know. Let's just do America. Since the turn of the century, scientists thought that doling out heroin at drugstores was great, or creating a cola that was cocaine flavored, or I don't know, lead paint, lead gasoline. DDT, all the variations of DDT, asbestos, which by the way, I actually like as a product. A lot of good things you can do with asbestos, unless you work in the factory, then you're screwed.
Yeah.
Or all the scientists that took the money and said that smoking was fine and secondhand smoke was a myth. Don't tell me. And it's like, oh yeah, science is the whole thing of science is my biggest problem with science or scientism is they don't apologize and they're never really that accountable when things go wrong. They just chalk it up and it's like, well, we're just going to revise our theory.
Well,
Come
I actually
on.
think it's much more sinister than that because they can't admit they're wrong because they need the faith of the masses to keep their pockets lined. Because
Yeah,
as soon as scientism is exposed, the grift is over. They can't trick you with cigarettes. They can't trick you with sugar science. They
right.
can't trick you with anything with any kind of medical treatment, the jig is up. The
Yeah.
jig is up once scientism is exposed. And that's why they never talk about scientism. And that's why, like, the most basic way I break it down, if you're following the scientific method objectively instead of presupposing a conclusion, then you're a scientist. If you're just peddling propaganda without showing your work, like you can claim the
Right.
study proves. How does it prove? Notice this is completely absent from the mainstream.
Yep.
There's never a demonstration of how it proves it. Like, what's the dependent variable? What's the independent variable? What were the controls? How do you know that this result is legitimate? It's never any of that. It's just like, oh, they said. And 90% of the time they're lying because when you pull up the study, it doesn't even say what they said it said.
Right.
Like with the recent medical treatments for the event, I actually went through them. I actually read hundreds of them because
Yeah.
I was curious. I'm a curious guy. And everything that the FDA was saying, everything that the CDC was saying, that's not what their own study linked on their own website was showing.
Yeah.
But everybody's too lazy to actually look at that.
Yeah. Yeah. The
Uh,
laziness. Yeah. There was a wonderful movie quote, and I can't remember, or was it Scanner Darkly, where it's like, what is the most common human react or emotion? Is it laziness or is it fear? It's like, ooh, that's a tough one.
that
Sometimes
is
it's
tough.
both. Yeah,
That's really
it's
tough.
yeah.
Yeah, so one of the reasons I actually wanted to talk to you was
Hmm.
I like the fact that you go off on tangents because we get to discuss things that otherwise we wouldn't have gotten to. So we went off on so many tangents, but I just want to finish
Yeah.
my point earlier where regardless of whether flat earth is true or not, if the
Hmm.
goal is to get a new world order, martial law, roll out, whatever, everything that Alex Jones see, there's a couple things that kind of don't make sense. So I also wanted to ask your opinion on Bill Cooper and your history with conspiracy. You kind of mentioned, if I remember correctly, JFK
Yeah.
started your conspiracy research.
Yeah, I started out again, I was raised on a rural island up near Canada. So it's about as disconnected from anything. I didn't even know there was more than one religion, honestly, until I left. And when I saw my first exposure to conspiracies at all, except for, the obvious like Bigfoot or UFOs or stuff like that, which was just books in a random bookstore, was JFK the movie by Oliver Stone back in the
Yeah.
early 90s. And I remember seeing it in a packed house. It was an amazing experience. And I remember everyone when I came out of that, never seen a theater so agitated about this because he shot it in a way where, if you know anything about how to brainwash, he interspliced his footage with with authentic period piece footage to where it was pretty seamless. And at that point, it's like, oh, maybe people in power do make bad decisions or decisions on their for the greater good, right? And then slowly but surely, as the computer world started up, when the internet, because there were no rabbit holes to go down, then 9/11 happened. And I'm trying to be careful about what I say here. When 9/11 happened, then things started picking up and the rabbit holes got bigger and deeper. And that's when I really got into it, to where I would go down every rabbit hole I could think of. And mostly because I had the time to do it because I never got married or had kids. So I went down everything you could think of and had an opinion on just about everything you could think of. So again, JFK was a lone gunman. The intern was killed by a lone gunman. Probably not. Probably more to it than that. But do I think that Bigfoot is currently dating the ghost of Elvis? Probably not. There's some things I
But
like
you'd
and
be
some.
open, you'd be open to seeing the evidence if it existed.
Oh yeah, and I've told people that. I go, because once I got into flat Earth, right, everything else was back on the table, and it would be
Yeah.
hypocritical. So now I'd say, oh, fine. So you say Bigfoot's pregnant, it's Elvis? Okay, I'll give you a couple minutes. What do you got? And I'm not kidding. I because what leg do I have to stand on? I wake up with flat Earth every day. And once you're into that, it's the big umbrella that covers everything else, and everything is possible. Why, if you can lie about some stuff, why couldn't you lie about that? And
See,
again, which is Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was a little weird. Even though I was into geocentrism, I've studied geocentrism for a long time.
Hmm.
All of these different conspiracies in the occult, I actually think the occult is inextricably linked with conspiracies
Sure.
because everything kind of from the secret, regardless of whether you believe what the secret societies believe is true regarding the gods and Satanism and all that, they believe it's true.
Oh yeah,
So,
the Vril
yeah,
Society.
yeah,
Go watch, spend a couple of hours looking at
yeah,
those guys,
yeah.
right?
Or whatever they're doing at Bohemian Grove. So
Right.
they believe it's true. There's an occult subtext to everything. And just from studying, I don't know, I really when I was studying all this stuff, I didn't think I was that unique that I was studying logic and psychology and philosophy all at the same time with occult spirituality.
Right.
And when you go back and look at the ancients, all of their wisdom I mean everything from astronomy to psychology to to cosmology
Right.
and even the Mayans talking about the demiurge, the matrix, the illusionary reality.
Yeah.
They had all these concepts. Again, who knows how long ago it was. Once you're going into the Tartaria rabbit holes, we don't really know how long ago that was.
Yeah.
But they knew all these things, and yet we're kind of scientism posits that they were that ignorant. Like, for example, the Mayan calendar needs one adjustment every 52 years, and
Right.
they can build pyramids that show shadows of snakes on solstices, and yet they don't know what the shape of the earth is. Now, again, I'm not saying they're correct. I'm just exposing how silly the scientism position is
Right.
to dismiss modern scientists are not building pyramids that can cast shadows on solstices.
Right.
Now, when they start doing that, then we can take their position a little bit more seriously, where basically they just made a bunch of assumptions, and obviously again, as anybody who goes back through this past century and actually looks at every piece, like even Einstein's Nobel Prize is based on the hoax, the eclipse data hoax, which was
Right.
admitted by
Right.
Eddington. So a lot of people don't know that. They don't teach that in school.
No.
So
No.
when his entire Nobel Prize, they also don't teach that when government schooling was adopting the new physics curriculum, they consulted Einstein for the textbooks and they flat out asked him to his face. This story, I believe it's in Physics Magazine. I forgot which issue. I have it somewhere.
Mhm.
And it's the full article. And they basically said, so either Maxwell was correct or you're correct. Which is it? And Einstein was like, well, obviously I'm correct. Now, Maxwell's not there. So
Right.
isn't it like, can you say conflict of interest? Like, it's just so weird. And all of modern physics is built on that fraud. When you're
Right.
building a house of cards, and people don't understand that. So when anything comes up flat Earth, I actually, if you notice, I don't really even spend the time debating the Earth being flat. I'm simply looking at the inaccuracies of the side of scientism in the globe because
Right.
it's kind of embarrassing. Like if you believe the world is a heliocentric globe and you don't know about the basics of physics history, what are you doing in this debate? Like it's really
Yeah.
silly.
It to me, science is just magic without mystery. Something I came up with a while ago, and you're absolutely right. It is stunning to me. We've only really been pushing this part for the last couple of years, what you just said there, which is it's amazing when you ask the average person on the street, just the stuff that we know, the scientific factoids, like how fast is the Earth rotating, how fast is it going around the sun, how fast is a solar system flying sideways through the galaxy, blah blah blah. We know all these things, and they don't know any of them, right? And so the
Yeah.
question is, why are you defending, or how are you even thinking you're going to defend a model which you don't even know your own basics? It's one thing to say, well, you say, well, it's in a book somewhere. It's like, yeah, but you don't know it. Why? It's all because it's obvious. It's like, really? According to who? There's a line, you probably know this one. George Orwell, it's a quote I put in the description box of every video I make, where George Orwell, 1984, he said in 1946, he wrote this little thing, and he was, again, not a flat earther, but he was talking how people will believe the authority of science just because, right? Just because they have
Are
lab
you
coats. And
sure? Are
he's,
you sure he wasn't a flat earther?
well, I think he was so against what he was against was the fact that if you put on a lab coat and hold a clipboard and just start pointing fingers and rattling off stuff, people will believe you because they think, well, this person's obviously smarter
Yeah,
than me. And he said, when you walk up to the average person on the street and you ask them how they know the world is a globe, they'll just come back immediately, knee-jerk response, and say, "Oh, well, it's known, right? It is known. It's a given, like algebra, right?" Which they don't know. And then you say, "Really? How do you know?" And then the gears start grinding because then they realize it's not that they know, they were told. And there's a big difference in that. It's like, okay, just because your father was told, his father going back several generations, doesn't mean it's true. It just means the story was passed down. You don't know for sure on your own. I mean, and the bigger question, which I think he was putting out there, was this was 1946. NASA wasn't even founded until 1958. How did everybody in the world know it was a globe when there was no space program at all in 1946? Because the scientists told them there were no spaceships. There's nothing. Nothing was like, hell, the war had just ended. So
yeah,
how'd you know? And they don't, and that bothers people. And he said people get agitated when you push them on this. And he was talking about the responsibility of science. It's like you better be right, was what he
yeah,
was basically saying. If you're going to start pushing this stuff, but it isn't. You know how that goes, which is it's a slippery slope. Once science figured out that they could start throwing this stuff out there and people will buy it, what's to stop them? There's no one checking them, especially what you said earlier, which is like they don't turn against their own. So it's like, oh, it's got to be true. Oh, look, gravity waves. Really? Oh yeah, it seems legit. Oh,
well,
look, there's water on Mars. There's
George
also
Carlin actually has one of my favorite. He has so many great ones, but
yeah.
my favorite one is one that nobody I've never heard anybody repeat it other than myself.
What?
You don't need a formal conspiracy when interests converge.
Oh,
So
that's
these
good.
yeah. So
That's good.
these people don't need to be in a room with each other plotting. It's I also use the example of when everybody says, "Oh, all the space agencies can't be in on it." This is no different than the mafias, whether
Right.
it's the Russian mafia, the Italian mafia. Whenever it's something that threatens their institution, they're on the same side. They'll fight with each other for territory and whatever. But if there's some kind of threat that threatens their ability, same thing with slave plantation owners. They're competing against other plantations. Their cotton is better, but as soon as something threatens the institution of slavery, all of a sudden they're on the same side and they don't have to go to a meeting to be on the same side.
Funny
So
how that works.
it's kind of obvious. And all of this goes to the reason why, like, I don't take sides on anything except I'm on the side of logic. That's
Right.
why I think studying logical fallacies in psychology is so important. And they stopped teaching it in schools somewhere around the early 90s. They
Sure.
just completely removed it from the curriculum because it used to be in the curriculum. You used to have to write an essay utilizing logic, deductive reasoning, etc., and explain it. That completely disappeared somewhere around the early 90s.
Yeah. Deductive reasoning is dangerous for a population that you're trying to keep just smart enough that they can keep the machine running, but not too smart. You know this. Not too smart that they start questioning things they don't want to question. Did I ever tell you, did you ever hear me talk about the prehistoric fish thing? Do I have time to say that one?
Oh, yeah. No, I remember that. You can say it real quick. Yeah.
Okay, so the prehistoric fish one, when I try to throw things at people, it's like science. So they because they'll come at me and they say, "Oh, you believe in the Loch Ness monster?" I go, "Fine. Let's look at the coelacanth fish, Coelacanth fish, right? Prehistoric fish died 70 million years ago. We've got fossil records, that whole thing, if you believe the carbon dating system. And every scientist in the world, this is to your point, every scientist in the world would have bet the frickin' farm that that fish was absolutely extinct. And then the British Navy catches one in a net off of South Africa in 1940, right? And then they wouldn't believe it, would not accept it. It's like, nope, obviously you made a mistake, right? And then there was another one caught off of Mozambique, another one off of Madagascar. So pretty soon they realized it's like, oh crap, Africa's not really that industrialized. No one was paying attention. They're swimming all around Africa, right? To where
Yeah.
National Geographic, finally did a special on them. And they could not deal with it. They could not handle it. And to where they were like they had to make up, they had to backtrack and make up new scientific terms just to explain the damn fish, right? Where it's like, well, it's a living fossil and it's in an evolutionary state of stasis. It's like, oh, really? 70 million years, never changed a single thing on it. Okay, fine. And they go, what's your point? My point is, um, they say, well, you believe in Loch Ness Monster, right? And they say, well, that's ridiculous. And I go, why? They go, well, because it's been extinct for at least like 100 million years. Oh, you mean like that fish
Yeah.
over there? That fish. So you were absolutely, I love the look on their face when I do it to them. I go, that fish, you were absolutely wrong. You and every one of your friends was absolutely wrong. But you're pretty solid on the Loch Ness thing, that there can't be any sort of reptile swimming around in a
Yeah.
dark, murky lake in frickin' Scotland. Drives
It
me frickin'
it gets
insane.
really funny because I've studied cryptozoology. I was always interested in cryptozoology as
I love
well.
cryptozoology. Yeah.
And the mountain gorilla was, I believe it was officially discovered in the 1970s, I believe, if I have that correct.
Oh, yeah.
That's pretty
Yeah.
recent for this giant mammal. We're not talking about like a little insect.
No,
This
look up
giant mammal.
after we're done, look up something called the billy ape. That was only 10, 15 years ago.
Wow,
It's a
yeah.
it's a 6 foot tall chimp that is really gun shy, a little play on words there, of humans for good reason, right? And they found a dead one that some villagers had put in a hut. It's like, holy
Yeah.
crap, this thing's huge, right? And it's like, then the only reason we did not find it is because every time they saw people, they're like, oh no, 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 no. We're gone. How it was hard. The giant panda, absolutely a myth. And you know
Yeah.
what? I'm gonna go with science on that one. It's like it sounds ridiculous. Oh,
Yeah.
so it's a cuddly black and white bear that just lies on its back all day and eats bamboo. Okay, sure. There it is. Not
Yeah.
gonna believe it.
I have like a list of other things we didn't even get to because we're having so much fun. I'm gonna try to get to them though. So
Okay,
your
go.
opinion, so you started with JFK. Did you
Yeah.
ever look into Bill Cooper and John Lear?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to miss Bill Cooper and,
Yeah.
and John Lear. I love some of the stories, the spooky base stories. If I ever had a wish list, if there was a government, it's like, okay, we'll give you one wish before we get, firing squad you. It's like, take me to the Hall of Nightmares in the Dulce base in New
Yeah.
Mexico. Take me to that. I'd love to see it because it
Yeah.
sounds so freaking wild. Um, anyway, go ahead. Sorry, I
So,
want to be brief.
on the subject of shills, though,
Yeah.
so Bill Cooper killed under mysterious circumstances. Alex Jones still alive. So, some people, what's your opinion on Alex Jones in terms of shill?
Alex Jones is useful. Period. Again, I'm going to talk from let's pretend because I love putting myself in other people's shoes. If I was in a government, I could in another lifetime, I absolutely could have worked for a government think tank. Absolutely could have done it because I get it. I get the whole
It
greater
might not
good.
be too late. They might want to recruit you.
I'm a little old. I mean, Joe Rogan, he got it at a perfect time, I think, where he actually looked at the camera. Such a great quote. It's like, he goes, guys, call me. He goes, I will sell my own mother. You ever seen that clip?
Yeah, I did, and then he gets the TV show after.
Well, funny how that works.
What
It's
a
like,
coincidence!
and I would have loved to have been in that meeting because it'd be like, dude, you asked, you were dumb enough, you said it on television. What did you think we were gonna do? Not call you?
Well, I'm
Um,
gonna get into Joe in a moment. I just wanted to touch upon Bill Cooper,
Alex,
John Lear, Alex Jones.
yeah, Alex Jones, he would be useful in this case because again, what you said earlier, which is that you not only do you want to kind of use him to polarize, but you can also use him to kind of see who's out there. Who's
Yeah,
who's following Alex Jones. I mean, anybody can be tracked. Everything is tracked now. So whoever's sending stuff, oh, Alex is great, and not just the people that buy his T-shirts and
yeah.
stuff, just people that talk about him. All that's tracked. So yeah, Alex Jones useful. Why kill him? Are you kidding? Who's going to replace him right now? Stu Peterson?
Well, definitely not that guy that was doing the debate with Austin Whitsitt. I mean, what was that guy's name? That guy was one of the silliest guys I have ever. That was one of the worst debates I
Yeah,
have
I
ever
wouldn't have
seen.
used him. I wouldn't have used him. I would use somebody else. I mean, he was just reading from a script,
Well, hold
and he
on
was
though. If the goal, so this is my theory on flat Earth. Again, regardless whether it's true or not,
yeah,
I think the reason why they're having the absolute silliest people, because these anti-flat Earth people, I call them anti-flat Earth grifters, like these people that come out with entire channels
yeah,
just to debunk something that's supposedly so silly and can't be true and is dumb.
yeah,
They do it on purpose to increase flat Earth memberships to distrust authorities, so that similar way that they allow Alex Jones to operate, So that way they can justify unleashing the martial law, the New World Order, et cetera, because nobody trusts authorities.
Possibly. I mean, we were, I've said it many times, we were helped for the first 3 years from 2015 to 2018. We were promoted. Absolutely. There's some wonderful videos on my channel to where the algorithms were absolutely letting us just run ripshot over the internet. We were crushing it. And then
Yeah,
they pulled us back. Then they demonetized the channels, then and cranked the governor down to where,
yeah,
so again, they didn't hit the brakes. They didn't knock out
right.
channels, but they took the
Yeah.
foot off the gas, that's for sure.
So, so the other thing before we get to Joe Rogan,
Yeah.
Project Bluebeam or Operation Bluebeam.
I'll believe it when I see it. I mean, I've been hoping for a blue beam thing, kind of like I've been hoping for. I was a Nibiru guy back in the day. It's like
Yeah, me
every
too.
year. Oh, it's like, oh man, that would. I mean, again, the movie Melancholia, which is a Nibiru movie, involving Kirsten Dunst and Alexander
I actually
Skarsgård.
haven't seen that one.
Oh God, watch it if you get a chance. That's all it is. It is a freaking Nibiru movie disguised as an art house picture,
I
shot in
didn't
Europe.
even know that.
Kirsten Dunst is the lead. In fact, you can even skip to the second half. You don't want to go through the first part. That's pretty boring. Um, the second part, I mean, trailer, spoiler alert, world dies, right? The binary star system, it's pretty much what you thought with Nibiru. But Bluebeam, the same thing. Like if Nibiru all of a sudden showed up in the sky right now, I'd be like, where have you been? It's like you are so out of your timetable because everybody, was predicting stuff back then. Bluebeam, I'd love to see it in real life.
So, but do
I'm
you think?
sad.
So
Sorry, go ahead.
I think the way I understand it, and Serge Monast, one of the OG conspiracy theorists, I did a video on him. A lot of people don't know about him. He was even predating. He was before Bill Cooper,
Okay.
and he wrote a book that we'll get in trouble for going into the exact details. But some of the trans agenda and depopulation, he wrote that in the '60s.
Oh wow.
He started writing his book, I think, in the '60s, came out early '80s. Bill Cooper's on the scene late '80s.
Yeah.
So he mysteriously gets brought into police custody age 50-ish.
Yeah.
Next day he drops dead.
Oh wow.
So he spends the night in jail. Then he comes home next day, drops dead.
There
And
are there are some people that are removed immediately. I have noticed that. People that they either they psychologically profile them or they look at the big picture and it's like, yeah, not worth. Bobby Kennedy, great example. Or that hacker that look that up. The guy that there was a hacker that just announced to people, it's like, oh yeah, by the way, I can now hack into pacemakers. He was gone in a week. Yeah.
wow.
Like,
I don't
dude,
yeah,
it's
I don't remember that.
yeah, there's
That's
certain guys,
crazy.
look that up. It was like,
I saw
look,
a TV show. I saw a TV show about that kind of recent, but yeah, that's scary stuff.
yeah,
That's
but
pretty
again,
scary.
the government looks out. Is if they can't, the whole briefcase, Joe Rogan, I know we'll get into it. The briefcase thing, you offer them the carrot and the stick
Yeah,
simultaneously. This briefcase has money. This briefcase has a gun. You get to choose. Or again, if they profile you, and it's like, yeah, we already know what he's going to choose. That it's over.
yeah.
So
So
anyway, go ahead.
Serge Monast posited that Bluebeam was already operational. So all of the UFOs in the sky are Bluebeam. And they're playing a long game for the faked alien invasion. So all of Hollywood with the alien movies, and even I'm still not 100% sure what Roswell is. If you have like a 60-second soundbite on it, um,
Okay, 60 second soundbite in Roswell. I watched the TV movie. If anyone's never seen it with Kyle MacLachlan, and Martin Sheen, wonderful movie. I like the story because, again, I'm a writer first and foremost, and there were no plot holes in it, meaning everyone reacted exactly like they should innocently until the government figured out what the hell was going on, and then the government just wiped the slate clean and made sure it was turned into a myth or a legend. I am a big believer. In fact, I'll send you a wonderful little video. Okay, two things really fast. Aside from Roswell, the greatest UFO sighting in history was not Roswell in 1940. Oh, crap, was that 1946 or 1947? I can't remember off the top of my head. Or 1899 Aurora, Texas. It was 1561 Nuremberg, Germany.
yeah,
Look that up.
yeah, I
The
remember that one.
wiki page is just absolutely
There was a huge one in ancient China that I
Oh, sure.
actually went over on my podcast as well.
Nice. But there's a wonderful video I'll send you. There's a great UFO sighting. I believe in them. I used to watch them. Do I believe that all of them are blue beam? No. Because there's some of them that can't be seen with the naked eye. With night vision binoculars, when I was in Colorado, I would lay in the snow and I would just stare at the sky, and I knew what I was looking at, and they were there
So
all the
So
time.
let's not fall for false dichotomies or trichotomies or quadrotities because
Right.
they could be military craft or they could be craft from lands beyond the Antarctic ice
There,
wall, if that theory is true. Or one of my favorite theories, they could be interdimensional craft.
Yeah, I know. I don't think they're us. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Our government, power perceived is power achieved. Our government loves to take credit for crap that's not ours, if all
I
possible.
think a certain percentage is the US government's to measure
Sure,
responses.
but not all. Not all. I mean, again, some of it predates. I'll
Yeah.
send you a wonderful
Yeah,
little
yeah.
video of one that was shot up here in British Columbia over a cloudless, windless um, inlet with a bunch of sailboats. And I could watch it. I could see what was happening. The sun had already gone down. Whatever ship was flying was didn't have its cloak on, because it's like you don't have to have your cloak on if it's dark, and they screwed up. It was like, no, there's too much light, and something happened, and they just flew right over the sailboats, and all the sailboats are freaking out, and it's like,
Yeah.
what the hell are we looking at? It's great. I'll send it to you. It's really short.
Yeah, no, these are fascinating topics, and I'm sure you're familiar with John Keel of the Mothman prophecies.
Yeah,
Are
yeah, I
you
am.
familiar with where he got most of his information and theories?
No.
It was a French ufologist called Jacques Vallée.
Hmm.
And so he's like the godfather of ufology, and very few people know about him. His theories, I mean, we're going back, I mean, what would that be? That we're talking 50s, possibly earlier. And this guy is talking about quantum ideas as well as consciousness. So he posited that these types of phenomenon are not unlike in previous civilization cycles and fairy tales, whatever you want to call them, these supernatural beings. He posited that these beings take into account the mind of, for lack of a better term, the victim, like either alien abductions or even or even a witness to a UFO, whatever's in their head. So if aliens are in their head, they can appear as aliens.
Oh, I
Whereas
gotcha.
in previous civilization cycles, it wasn't aliens, it was some kind of a monster or a fairy or a mermaid or whatever. So
Dragons.
Jacques
Yeah.
Vallée is so ahead of his time with some of these quantum, and I don't think he called it interdimensional, but when you read the theories, it kind of reads like these are interdimensional beings. So
Sure.
in
I
terms
would.
of shills, also, I think a lot of people might be unknowing shills. Like Bob Lazar, my theory on Bob Lazar is that he's telling the truth
Yeah.
and that he was shown man-made aircraft and was told that they were extraterrestrial craft,
Yeah.
and they wanted to see what would happen when he leaked it.
There you
And
go.
because they didn't tell him, he could pass every polygraph because he's
Yeah.
not in on it. Like that's the
There you.
whole point of the experiment. And for whatever reason, everybody like in the mainstream, like they can't even consider that as a viable option.
Yeah, I like
To,
that. And yeah, catch and release.
yeah,
Absolutely. Why wouldn't you? Because again, to your point, why wouldn't they off him almost immediately the second he started talking?
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
kind of like
Well,
ask. Go
have
ahead.
you heard the story where he's only told this once or twice? Apparently, there were incidents with Men in Black where they did try to off him. I'm not 100% sure if this was if you listen to my Bob Lazar podcast,
Yeah,
I actually dug up some interesting things on his previous life. He was married previously to a woman with connections to the Hells Angels, and they were CIA infiltrated. So he's got some weird connections going back to his first, even before he ever made it to Los Alamos.
I would anyone that says they quote unquote escaped from something like that,
Yeah,
like, oh, they almost got me. I treat it no look, I've read so many plot things over my decades. Treat it no different than the oh God, what's it called? Wasn't called The Marathon Man. Oh, I'm gonna have to look it up. It's the Dustin Hoffman movie where they stage a fake rescue, right? And during the rescue, they're asking him questions, but the questions are just more interrogation. And then when they realized he wasn't going to ask, they just drove him right back to the torture chamber. And but the point was it was a
That's
complete,
funny.
yeah, it was a fake rescue,
Yeah.
and it was brilliant because the audience didn't see it coming. So yeah, if you escape Men in Black, it's like that's a great way to, like, add,
I hadn't even considered that, but that actually makes a lot of sense.
yeah, why
I
wouldn't
actually
you?
thought I thought he might be lying about that particular incident because apparently there was an incident in his house where it was burglarized or whatever, and he saw guys in suits. Yeah, I don't know the exact, I don't remember. It was so long ago. And there was another incident where they actually opened fire on him on a highway.
Sure.
And
Again, flushing somebody out. He doesn't even have to be lying, right? All
yeah,
you have to do is make it close enough. You add that stress, it's like, holy crap, they almost
yeah,
got me.
yeah.
It's good.
I wonder if I could track down the dates because his first interview on Japanese television, he didn't show his face, so he was in the dark, if you remember, his very first interview.
Mhm.
And then it was a few weeks or even a month or two later when he went on the American news, he went public with his name and his face. So I wonder if that was in between those interviews. That would make sense.
Sure.
Okay, so
Oh, it
we
is
touched.
Marathon Man. I was right. Thank God. It is. If
Okay,
guys check out the movie Marathon Man
okay.
from 1976. There you go.
You
That's the one.
actually name it like I'm pretty good with movies. I've actually seen a ton of movies, but the ones you happen to name in this one I haven't seen, but I've seen
Yeah.
so many. But um
Nice.
so Bill Cooper, Bill Cooper also kind of went from extraterrestrials to demons, as well
Yes.
as many others. What do you
Yeah.
think about that?
I don't know. One man's alien is another man's demon. I don't know how you. I mean, there because I grew up in an evangelical Christian home. Of course, a big believer of light and the darkness, good and evil, demons and angels. I don't know. Possibly, I just don't know. I mean, there was what was that te wonderful television series came out a couple of years ago, Childhood's End, where the aliens that showed up were red and scaly with horns and a bifurcated tail,
Yeah.
right? And people immediately, it's like, holy, can't trust these guys. But why? Well, because they look like what? How demons are depicted
Well,
in.
so this kind of goes back to Jacques Vallée too, because if it's a religious person, would an interdimensional entity take the form of a demon or whatever?
Yes.
It's pretty curious, pretty
Yeah.
curious.
Or the 1561 Nuremberg event, because it was so early and there was no science fiction in 1561. The German people looked at it like it was a religious event. That was the only
Yeah,
way they could describe it. There was no other frame of reference for
yeah,
them. So, I mean, could it be demons? Sure. But at the same time, demons have to come from somewhere. I'd like to talk to
yeah,
one
yeah.
just to get the backstory.
Okay, so Joe Rogan, real quick.
Yeah.
Okay, so I listened to part of your recent podcast, which, by the way, I take umbrage with your chastising words against the Hoff, David Hasselhoff. When a guy is that talented, we're not talking luck here. We're talking a once in a lifetime talent. I mean, this guy's a phenomenal singer. I mean, this guy single-handedly brought down the Berlin Wall with his rendition of Looking for Freedom. All I know is that the wall was up before he sang, and then after he sang, it was down. And his acting talent is beyond anything that has since been seen, not to mention how prolific he is. Can you name another individual with more TV shows, movies, albums, live performances, radio shows, reality shows? I mean, this guy does it all.
That the combination, probably not. It's just that again, I'm not picking on David Hasselhoff. I like him. I think he's fine, except for that drunken rant on the bathroom floor, which was unpleasant some years ago. He's fine. It's just that there are actors out there that just I've talked to just shake their heads like, oh God, that lucky SOB. Again, he didn't. I'm sure he did not know that. Like, we won't even go into Knight Rider, right? That Baywatch was going to be such a massive international success. Who could have possibly
Well,
known that?
it actually wasn't. They got canceled first season. I don't know if you're familiar with the lore. They got
Hmm.
canceled first season And the Hoff basically, he either bought the rights to it, a combination of buying the rights and producing it. Like he put his own money into it and
I
got the
did not
rights
know this.
after it got canceled because it was so bad. I mean, if you remember
It was terrible. Yeah.
season one was bad.
Yeah.
And they had that really distasteful episode that nobody talks about where there's a serial killer on the loose. It
Oh
was
wow.
so distasteful because can you imagine, like, bright and sunny lifeguards, and then they're making jokes about people getting murdered? It was
Oh
a really
God.
distasteful episode.
Wow.
Like, that's my
So
least
you're
favorite
saying that
episode.
the reason it became so popular was because David Hasselhoff.
Well,
I'm gonna look up the lore on this.
yeah, so for season two, he actually was more in control and he made it more about the lifeguarding because season one was all over the place. They even had what was his name? Cary Tagaya, like that martial arts actor, the guy that
Yeah.
played Shang Tsung
Okay.
in Mortal Kombat. He
Oh
was
yeah.
in an episode with a samurai sword fight with the Ha. So you have lifeguards in samurai fights when his kid got kidnapped. Like season one is bonkers. Like
Oh.
season one is some of the most insane television ever aired, and then
I'm gonna have to.
season two is the Baywatch that everybody thinks of. Like season
Ah,
two onward is like normal lifeguard stuff. But Baywatch Nights was also kind of awesome, where it gets into the paranormal. And again, so Hasselhoff is filming feature films, recording albums, doing live shows while filming two shows simultaneously and producing them. There has
all
never
right.
been a talent like this before.
I stand corrected. You know what? I will give in future things. I will give David Hasselhoff more credit, but I'm still not giving him credit for Knight Rider because that was not him. That was all
That
again.
was not, you are correct about that.
The
That
American
was not
people
him.
who would have again, it happens every once in a while. You don't know. The first rule of media has never changed, which is give the people what they want. And most of them they don't know what they want.
Yeah.
And in this case, it's like, oh yeah, it's just a Saturday morning stupid show about a talking car. It's like
I love that show, by the way. Anyway,
everybody did. Everybody did. It's like prime time, just ratings through the freaking roof.
well, because
Why?
there was really nothing quite like it. It was just
No,
awesome.
no. It's like it wasn't true. It was AI
Yeah.
before AI was. I won't get into it. Okay,
So,
what else you got?
anyway, with Joe Rogan,
Yeah.
how is he not a shill?
Oh no, no, he is a show. He
Okay.
absolutely, absolutely is. But he is not. Is he privy to a lot of things? Um, uh, no, no, I don't think he is. I mean, they gave again. You know the story as much as anyone. He was one of the early truth guys.
Yeah.
Ironic that he played on news radio, a conspiracy guy. A conspiracy maintenance guy back in the 90s. And then they give him a show called Joe Rogan Questions Everything. And in episode one, he apologizes to NASA for every bad thing he ever said about them, including, there's no way we went to the moon. And then they make him the biggest podcast in the world for a while. I think he's number two now, but whatever. And he has astronauts on and Neil deGrasse Tyson on and all that stuff. Oh no, 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 no. And one of his mentors, one of the guys he really looks up to is Alex Jones. Legitimately. I've seen those two in the same room together and he
Yeah.
just worships freaking Alex Jones, which is so weird. It's like,
It
no, your
is.
career is
Yeah.
way different than Alex Jones.
Yeah.
But no, I think that Alex was, and Alex Jones even said so as much during his divorce trial, where not only did Alex say that that his character was a complete fabrication, that whole rah, 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 that whole
Yeah.
thing, but that Joe was compromised. That it's
Yeah.
like, they offered him the two briefcases
Yeah.
and Joe
Well,
played ball.
he's not the only person to say that about Joe Rogan. So
Uh,
one of the most interesting things about Joe Rogan, his pivot on the moon landing, the
Right.
reason it was so obvious was because he never said why. Like, what was the exact reason where all of his previous arguments were suddenly invalidated? Like, where's the like what led him to change the position? That's what's so obvious. He never,
Yeah. Yeah, that was my point that I threw at people. I go, if he's legit, if he's sincere, he'd be the only man I've ever known that actually climbed out of the rabbit hole entirely, turned around and said, "Oh, I didn't see anything." It's like, how? No, it's impossible, right? Especially you know full well. I mean, NASA, you can't attack NASA with that sort of enthusiasm and conviction, and he had it, which is why they got to him
yeah,
and then turn around and say I was completely wrong. You can explain what you said, what reasonings behind this? Nope. I'm just gonna, hey, look, I've got an astronaut as a guest, and just continue on from
Well,
there. It's like,
and the other thing too regarding 9/11, the way he tiptoes around it now, because he had some heated debates in the past
right,
on 9/11 and the demolition.
sure.
And now, whenever it comes up, he doesn't jump to defend the official narrative, but it's very obvious how he tiptoes and doesn't want to really get into the conversation about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a sign of somebody that's, in the back of their mind, it's like there could be consequences if I
Yeah,
talk about this. Oh, really? Where are those consequences coming from?
yeah. Have you seen my Apollo missions episodes where I have the electromagnetic frequency breakdown?
I think so. I think so. I've watched a lot
Where
of your stuff.
you can see that the frequency is identical to artificial interior lighting
No,
from the moon
that
landing. But
sounds
and
about right.
nobody's ever come up with a rebuttal for it.
Sure.
So nobody's even tried, which I thought was interesting.
Most of the time they don't want to talk about anything. They know full well. I've talked to scientists, and they don't even want to address Apollo nowadays
Yeah,
because it's aged so badly. I mean, hell, one of the things I came up with not too long ago at all was, I go, isn't it interesting that even though scuba divers are constantly watching their oxygen gauges, right? That's all they
yeah,
do. The astronauts did not care. It never came up. Meaning the again, especially with that car, right? You're driving miles in that direction. That car breaks down, you're gonna have to hoof it back. Do you
yeah.
got the air? Not even an issue. It's
That's
like,
a good point.
what
That's a good
magical
point.
thing in 1969 did you have unlimited air? No one talks about it. And that is a production technique. That is straight up Hollywood, which is there are
Yeah.
certain things when you write scripts, which is we don't want to talk about it because it'll bog down the
Have you
plot.
have you seen my Matt Walsh breakdown on his defense of the moon landing?
Maybe. Why? What
Check.
was the?
So I did the logical fallacy counter. He's been setting records. He was setting
Oh, I think I
records,
did say some of this, but go
and
ahead.
I brought up a couple things that I haven't seen people bring up. Like he was arguing that there were no whistleblowers. There was more than one deathbed confession on
And
it.
more
So
than one death.
yeah, where they actually named the exact. I don't remember the exact place. They named exactly where they shot it.
Sure, I can see
So
that.
now maybe they're lying, but obviously it's false to claim that there were no deathbed confessions because there were.
Right.
So I thought that was kind of interesting, and then that kind of disappeared from the internet pretty quickly
Yeah. And
because
you
I
want
remember it
to
was really big news for one day, and then it got scrubbed.
People also say, why has no astronaut, come out and said something? It's like, okay, first off, there's less than 600 people that even have claimed to have been in that position. And then everyone, again, if I was them, you'd psychologically profile every single one of these guys, and
Yeah.
then you tap every form of communication they had. You'd monitor their phones, their emails, their spouses' phones, all their friends, and you would look for the telltale signs. If anyone even wavered in the slightest, you would have the briefcase conversation with them. It's like, remember what we talked about?
Were
Because
were
again,
you
there's a.
on were you
Oh, go
on
ahead.
Google Forums back in the day?
No, no, I wasn't. I was
Wow.
AOL forums, but not Google forums.
What went on Google? Um, Again, there's no way to verify these were the actual astronauts or their families,
Yeah.
but this was in the 90s. I probably shouldn't say this. I have some of them saved. They did discuss it.
Really?
Now, it was the way well, their family members said
Oh,
that
okay.
they discussed it.
Got it. Got
And
it.
they
Got
were
it.
saying they didn't really want to talk about it, but when they got drunk this one time, and they're just interesting story. Maybe it's all made up, but I just thought it was interesting because you really can't control someone getting drunk like out of their entire life. And some of them were alcoholics, especially after the missions, not
Yes.
necessarily before, which
Yes.
is also
Absolutely.
curious.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway, just regarding Rogan, have you seen? I believe his name was Matthew North. Do you know who that is?
Not by name, but go ahead.
So Matthew North was this I think I played a short clip, I forget which podcast. This kid did tons of research. Um JR, who does the podcast with me sometimes, I have no idea in what capacity he works for the government. It might be a janitor for the Park Service. That's my joke. But
Okay.
he I think he's at least been around water coolers where he's heard things discussed because he knows the exact details of how the State Department pays other departments so they don't even know where people work. Like he knew all these little details that nobody knows.
Okay.
So either way, he said that Matthew North reads exactly like a shill because this was some 19-year-old kid with this stratospheric IQ. Just the way you could listen to him talk. His videos are still on Rumble. I think they've been taken down on YouTube, but they're on Rumble. People re-uploaded them. So he's dead now. Nobody knows how he died. But
Hmm.
he made a few videos. He made one big video, it was like 2 or 3 hours long, where he exposed Alex Jones, Joe Rogan. He named their CIA handlers. He traced everywhere they lived and who they worked with and who their managers were. It was
Hmm.
really crazy. Now,
Hmm.
and then all of a sudden his obituary pops up, but it doesn't say a cause of death.
And he was 19.
At the time of the video, I forget exact. He might have even been 17 when he first started making the videos,
Hmm.
but they're videos, so you can see him talking.
Hmm.
So it's in because he's definitely some kind of super genius because the way he was able to just collate all of this information, like I can't do it, and
Yeah.
I've been studying stuff for decades.
Yeah.
So he was like a super genius, and
Huh.
he traced Alex Jones and Joe Rogan. He said these are not organic individuals.
It's possible. I use the I'm gonna call it the Good Will Hunting reference, and that is if you have a Will Hunting character that absolutely cannot be controlled. Yeah. Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, we have no
Yeah.
chance. This guy is not necessarily an anarchist, but he would do like nothing better than to tear down part of the establishment. Uh,
And I don't believe I haven't seen because I remember actually seeing his videos when they first popped up. Nobody even attempted a rebuttal because he sourced everything. He had all the receipts.
wow.
Nobody even attempted a rebuttal. It
Hmm.
was just either people calling him crazy or
Hmm.
people saying, wow, that's amazing that you went. Because this was years ago. I don't know, that maybe 2017, maybe somewhere around there.
Hmm.
So this was this was probably were people calling Alex Jones a shill back then? Maybe, but not as much as
Not as
now.
much as they are
Yeah,
now. The
not
the
as much
big
as
thing
now.
that got Alex was when he showed up with Piers Morgan on CNN, and Piers Morgan was interviewing him, and it's like, and I raised an eyebrow. It's like, what are you doing on there, and why is he on there?
I'm
Why is
actually I actually don't know what to make of Alex Jones. If he was an MK Ultra personality, he
yeah,
definitely at least has one personality that is not aware that he's a shill.
very
Because
possible.
yeah, that's my theory on that. Because even his interview about the Piers Morgan interview, like how he was explaining everything backstage,
Yeah.
that was not the same personality that was in the like if you watch them side by side, it's almost like it's a completely different person. It's weird. It's
They
really
they could
weird.
be they could be using subliminal nudging
Yeah,
on him. Just I mean, you don't have to. I mean, again, you want to keep his enthusiasm,
yeah,
the way it is. You want to keep him as authentic as you can. There's only so much you can do though, because the truther community is naturally suspicious. So they're always going to squint at him and wonder what I'm wondering, how if the massive divorce and attack, with the whole school thing we're not
yeah,
supposed to talk about, if
yeah.
that hurt him or helped him. I'm not sure because they made an example out of
I'm
him,
not
but
sure either.
at the same time, it might have actually given him more credibility in our circles. But whatever.
So you know David Weiss quite well.
Yeah, yeah.
What is his opinion of Alex Jones? I'm going to talk to him too, but I was just wondering what does he make of Alex Jones because he met him in person.
He did. He. I think David is still, again, when you meet somebody in person, it's a little different.
Yeah,
Because Alex was saying stuff behind the scenes that that he can't say anymore on air, that he's still sticking to his story, especially about school stuff. And so,
wow.
yeah.
Are you okay with me sharing this?
Oh, that's fine. That's fine. What are they gonna do?
Okay.
It's hearsay of hearsay.
Yeah.
So it's Like, wait, there's not much you can say. And of course, I mean, again, that just because you make an example of them doesn't mean they're going to change their tune,
Right.
right? It's not like he's going to walk it back like, well, I was wrong with this, blah, blah, blah. Nothing like that. So, no, I think David's going to say, oh yeah, he's authentic. Now, to what capacity is he being kind of again nudged in certain directions without his knowledge? Very, very possible. Sure, I that's what you would do. I mean, he's one of the
Yeah.
leading guys in that demographic, so why wouldn't you? But do I think he's I don't think he's Joe Rogan, right? Let's put it that
Right.
way.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Where Joe knows what's going on. I think
Yeah.
Alex is more like Alex may have suspicions, but what can he do? He's in a tough spot
Yeah.
now, especially with the money. Now it's like when you're sued for $1 billion, when an individual is sued for $1 billion,
It was actually it was actually several trillion was the highest number.
you're kidding. Was it actually
No.
$1 trillion?
At one
That's
point, that was
good
the
Lord.
requested amount.
Hmm.
I think it was it
Let
was I think it was 2 or 3 point something trillion, like higher than the GDP of certain countries.
hmm.
That's what they wanted. Now that's not the current number,
Yeah.
but there's at least one article. There was one of the earlier rulings. That's what they were going for. They were going for trillion, not billion.
I mean, it's a dual purpose win for the establishment, which is not only do you send a huge flag saying, hey, there, don't be
Yeah.
like that guy. And at the same time, you can go to him. It's like, okay, you gonna be more pliable here. You don't have to meet with us like once every
Well,
month.
I don't think he's paid a single dollar, right?
I don't think so either.
Yeah.
No.
I don't think he's actually paid it because he just declared bankruptcy.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you had to.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You had to. But no, that was one of my, and I know we can't talk about it, but yeah, it was in fact, I put a challenge out there for a number of years, where I said, and again, I'm being delicate with the verbiage here, where I said, look, I'll PayPal anybody $1,000 if you can show me a 10-second clip of an individual that's being taken out of that place in real time. The problem,
Yeah.
the why that operation was blown immediately is because the traffic helicopters got there so quickly. Because again, they
Yeah.
didn't have traffic to deal with, that it was over, right? It's like they're just hovering on a full tank of gas for a long time and
Yeah.
nobody was coming out.
For some reason, there seems to be, I don't know why, but there's like a timer on some of these events. For example, I mean, I don't know if I'm going to get shut down soon, but I have the longest running Columbine series on YouTube. And I actually went through all of the documents, the thousands of documents in Columbine. I don't know
Yeah.
if you're familiar with the Columbine conspiracy.
I was actually in Denver when it happened.
No
I
way.
was
Wow.
living
So what
in
you were
Denver.
watching it on the news as it unfolded?
Believe it or not, funny story. I was on a business trip in Houston that day. I just flown from Denver to Houston, and I remember my boss calling me up because of my fireworks thing, and he calls me up in my hotel room, and he goes, I just want to know, because he and I are about the same age, and he goes, did you have anything to do with this at all? You can tell me, right?
Wow, that's messed up.
Anyway, I know. And I said, that is so messed up. Why are you
Yeah.
asking me this? He's going, look, we talked about your past. I want to know. I go, no, I didn't have anything to do with it. Then I made some funny comment about it. But anyway, go ahead. Yeah. So no, I'm very aware of the Columbine thing, but go ahead.
In my latest episode, I actually played the dispatch audio,
Oh, did
and
you?
everybody knew that it was going to happen. Two agencies got the tip that it was going to happen. There's a national trenchcoat mafia, and there were so many agents. This is straight from one of the officers.
Oh,
I mean, the amount that's been covered up in Columbine is just astounding. It's
yeah.
absolutely astounding. And it looks like there were probably 7 or 8 shooters.
Oh, wow. Well, they
And
were supposed to. Yeah, go ahead.
some of them were identified as middle-aged men.
Oh, wow.
So not high school kids.
The,
So they
the
might have had some handlers there.
Very possible. And the point I want to make there, the comparison was that it took a long time for that to be resolved, right? There were kids throwing themselves out of windows. There were a lot of injuries on top of
Yeah.
the deaths. And the point was it took a long time. Do you know how long it would take to evacuate 600 elementary kids from a place? You'd have to go room to room. It would take for
Well,
freaking
I have
forever.
another question. Have
Yeah.
you ever seen Obviously, we're not talking about the event in Connecticut. We are
Of
not talking
course.
about that event.
Connecticut,
We're
what's that?
talking about elementary schools in other states. Have you ever seen one without any Christmas decorations on Christmas
Excellent point.
in December? That one,
Excellent
that
point.
kind of got me. Not to mention, if you read ballistic, again, we're not talking about the event in Connecticut. But if you ask someone to believe about an event that happened outside of Connecticut in other states or other countries, would you believe that moving targets have a 100% accuracy rate from a handgun? We're talking like 11,
Oh,
12, 13
you,
shots.
oh no, I'm a shooter. That was one of the first
Okay.
things I jumped on,
Yeah.
which was okay, 150 rounds fired, right? And no wounded. But if, by the way, it's never happened in the history of mass shooting. It's like a perfect kill ratio. It doesn't happen. So you're telling me that either every shot was absolutely lethal or it was a complete miss. And
Yeah.
okay, stats. Somebody give me the stats on this. It never ever happens. Ever,
But how do
ever,
you
ever.
how do you have 100% accuracy against a moving target?
It, yeah,
I mean,
I
it's
know.
anyway. Okay, so
I
let's
know.
so Joe Rogan,
Yep.
very, very curious individual. Some people think that he platformed Eddie Bravo. I did a whole 7 hour breakdown of Eddie thrashing him logically on flat Earth and nuclear weapons too. But
Yeah.
the some people think that Joe Rogan's more he's platforming flat Earth to get it out there while pretending to be against it. What do you think about that theory?
If he is, then even that is being directed by somebody else. I don't think he came up with it on his own.
Probably
Again,
not.
the mixed message during his comedy special, drove me insane, which is
Yeah.
why I had to make that little video.
Yeah,
It's
that
like,
was weird.
okay, again, 8 minutes, no moon landing. 34 minutes, looks flat. 59 minutes, flat earthers are retarded. Where are you going? Where are you going with this? Who did
I
you
think,
must bet?
yeah, it's almost like that was an intentional shot,
Yeah.
like a wink wink type shot, not
Yeah.
like an organic joke.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, routines like that, especially stuff like that. I mean, they just refined and refined and refined. There was, there's no accident there. So, it could be. It's very possible. I knew that in the past, and you've seen him do it. He brought up flat Earth to
Yeah,
many guests,
yeah, yeah.
partly because it's good production value. You bring it up at like a shock value and see what they do,
It
right?
was actually hilarious because I did a logical analysis when he had Michael Shermer on, the
Yeah,
alleged skeptic, who's never skeptical about anything coming from the establishment.
yeah.
And they were so clueless. They thought that all of the ancient civilizations, including the Sumerians, had a globe Earth cosmology. Like, talk about clueless. Like,
Oof.
they couldn't even go on Wikipedia for 2 seconds. And obviously, Jamie is not fact checking Shermer a single time. He would never fact check Shermer or Neil deGrasse. Like, he would never fact check any of those guys. He'll only fact check Eddie Bravo
Right, right.
and not
And
even fact check correctly at that.
I
But
will give. I'm sorry.
what?
Go ahead.
I just have two more questions.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
One of them is this controversial question. I
Mhm.
actually don't know what they were talking about, but a lot of people in the chat on some of the Flat Earth podcasts on Mindshock were asking you why you didn't quit Flat Earth. Was there some kind of a challenge? I don't know anything about.
Oh my God. Okay. So some years ago, I said again, I threw it out there for a number of years, and where I said, look, you're not going to find a curvature in any picture, especially from an airline, airplane photo. An actual curvature. If you take a, I go, the routine was you take a picture, then you take it home, you put it on your laptop or whatever, and you hold a straight edge up to it, right? If it's still curved, right, send me the picture, I'll quit flat Earth. And that went on for, oh, good Lord, 4 or 5 years at least. Nobody sent me anything, right? Because they couldn't, right? There's nothing
Yeah.
to send, right? If it's a legitimate picture. And then some photographer, I think he was from England, took a couple shots. With clouds in the distance, the clouds had a nice curve at the edges of them, and he sent them off. But then made a video of it, sending it to me and calling me on the phone, leaving a voicemail. And then his guys are like, "Oh, see, he should have quit flat Earth." And so it's been like a running joke for at least a year and a half now, where it's like,
Okay.
"Oh, Mark."
The
Go ahead.
person in the chat made it sound like it was something, some kind of legit, like not a photo, it was some kind of like legit challenge of some kind.
Oh, no, no, that's different. That's separate. That's the Antarctica challenge. No, me quitting, that's straight up that's just the photo thing, right? But they could,
Okay.
but the Antarctica challenge, you look, and I'm sure you're aware of the final experiment,
Yeah.
the Jaren thing. That's what that's about, which is, oh, aren't you going to quit flat Earth like Jaren's going to quit flat Earth when he goes down to Antarctica with the trolls or whoever's taking him down there and he sees the 24-hour sun. And nobody's going to quit flat Earth. I mean, Jaren, I don't think even Jaren's going to die on that hill. For me, it's never been about that because I said yes. I've said that literally since year one, which is the weakest aspect of flat Earth. Just from a technical standpoint, has to be the 24-hour sun because there can't be a 24-hour sun if there's just one light source, unless there's more than one light source. But then I'm a big virtual guy. I'm a big matrixy guy and programmer, right? Software. So I was like, look, you want to make a 24-hour sun? It's not hard to do. We do it in stuff all the time. But Jaren's putting a lot of weight behind it, and so are the trolls. And Jaren, what I'm trying to remind people is it doesn't give, even if you saw a 24-hour sun, it just say, fine, there's a 24-hour sun. That does not give it veto power over everything we've been covering for the last 9 years. Not even close, especially when it comes to NASA and all the other stuff. Is it a plot hole in flat Earth? Yeah, but I addressed it in the
Well,
beginning.
I actually I actually wouldn't say it. So first of all, I am
Mhm.
not saying flat Earth is true. But
I know.
whether it's true or not,
Right.
the 24-hour sun in Antarctica wouldn't be a plot hole because according to the scientific method, you would have to verify the distances between continents relative to Antarctica first
There you go.
to know the path of the sun. Actually, I'm going to discuss this with Dave Weiss
Sure.
when I talk to him because he wanted to discuss it because
Oh, he's
he
got an
actually,
opinion or two on it.
what was that?
He's got an opinion or two on it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that's my issue with it because this it's like all of these globe earthers, they're arguing without understanding what a begging the question logical fallacies. If they just understood that fallacy,
Hmm.
all flat earth debates would be 99% shorter because they spent all that time as if because they presuppose the continents are exactly where they are said to be.
Right.
Like when you're dealing with science, you have to verify all of those distances. Because when you're standing in what's purported to be Antarctica, you might not be where you think you are in relation to the other continents. And
Mm.
that's a big thing. And for whatever reason, it's
Sure.
really hard. Like 99% of the trolls in the Mindshock chat on Flat Earth podcasts are people who don't understand that basic concept. If they just understood that concept, it would be so much easier. So
Mm.
my final question, which I think
Okay.
you've gotten this before too,
Hmm.
where do you see all of this going? Because Flat Earth has just skyrocketed in popularity over the
Right.
past few years. There is no going back. There's just no going back because even the mere act of asking those questions against authorities and scientism, even just for the sake of argument, let's say Flat Earth, there's some kind of a damning evidence disproving Flat Earth. There's still no going back because of everything else that it touched in terms of authorities and scientism.
Hmm.
So where do you see like what kind of world do you see in let's say another 2, 3, 4, 5 years
Yeah.
because of everything that has happened with the light? The reason why I love flat earth debate so much is just the logical aspect. Because when you understand logic, you can apply it to anything, to any area of life. And
Right.
flat earth is just it's some of the best content in addressing not just logic, but psychology with cognitive dissonance and everything else. So where do you see the world because of this cat being let out of the bag? Where's this going in the next few years?
For me, I mean, it's been a wish of mine for some time, and I call it the Tower of Babel protocol, which is avenge. If you know the Tower of Babel story, one of the shortest, wonderful stories in Genesis, which is that the first civilization that was here, not us, was too good at what they did. They weren't divisive in any way. They were unified. They had amazing engineering skills, and they figured out where we were almost immediately. And they figured out there was a ceiling to this place, and it's like, yeah, you know what? We can do it. Let's build a freaking structure, a big bridge to the top. And as soon as they started working on it, whoever was responsible for this place, call it God or whatever you want, advanced civilization, interdimensional, whoever, looks down and says, this isn't good. They're going to make it. So we got to do something here. So at that point, diversity was put into place, which was, language, 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 scatter, 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 tear it down, and then, kind of start over. Um, that's what I think happens with every civilization to a certain point, or maybe doesn't. But that's what I believe in anyway. Kind of like the 100th monkey effect, which is if enough people wake up to this, snap out of the matrix. We'll use the Matrix reference, even though the movie's 25 years old now. If enough people snap out of it, enough people realize where they are, then whoever's responsible for this place chimes in and says, "Okay, well, it's time. It's time to move on to whatever the next phase. If you want to call it a reset, that's fine. But I call it kind of like a graduating class. Every high school, when you graduate from high school, right? You don't get to stay there anymore. You get off somewhere. We got a new class coming in. You don't have to go home, but you got to get the hell out of here. And that's how it works. I think every civilization has their time. We've had unbroken history. We'll just round down to like 5,000 years, give or take. Unbroken history. Once we have our time here, then we have our chance to move on to do something else, and that's what I'm kind of hoping for. A bigger, better world. Where we go, I don't know, but it's got to be more interesting than what we're doing now. So that's, flat Earth for me has always been a message of hope, which is you're not alone in, this empty universe. And if that brings about a massive change that's outside of our scope, outside of our civilization, I'm all for it. So that's what I'm hoping for. It's
It's
not just enough for me to have people woken up, start a big revolution to take over governments. That works out. It's just going to be another government moves in that tries to align itself more with the general population. So does that kind of help? Kind of.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to imagine that kind of shift can happen smoothly, so to speak.
I didn't say it'd be smooth. I'm just saying that's what probably would be the outcome, which is whoever's responsible for this place, call it the superintendent, whoever. It's just a bigger version than us. Again, the things that were there during the Nuremberg event in 1561. Um, Whoever the caretakers are, I think they're watching it very closely. And if if you figure out again, if all of a sudden this place isn't a nature preserve anymore, where we don't realize once you realize the structure, the actual nature of the world, then it's different, right? Sorry, on a quick tangent, it's the same logic of why this one, why the astronauts wouldn't put their hand on the Bible, right?
Yeah,
For Bart Sibrel, which is like, look, people lie under oath all the time. It's called
yeah,
perjury, and we have
yeah,
tons of laws for it. So why were the astronauts treating the Bible like it was radioactive, or that was made out of molten lead?
yeah,
I think it's because it's different when you know. Meaning, it's one thing if you believe in a creator, right? Or a higher power. It's another thing to know there's a higher power. When you believe, you're willing to take chances because, well, it's a belief, right? But if you know, then you're looking up at the sky and you're seeing someone, looking over the top of a newspaper, from the couch looking at you. And so you're not going to do what I think you're going to do. It's like, no. I mean, it's the same reason I will never do anything malicious to anyone else ever in my life, gun to my head, because I'm not going to take that chance ever again. I'm all about not necessarily peace and love, but I'm not going to go out of my way to pick on someone just for my own pleasure. So there you
yeah.
go.
I'm gonna round this out with a compliment for you, Mark.
Hmm.
I think I'm not sure how much Flat Earth Mindshock would even cover if it weren't for some of your interviews on like mainstream segments, because
Oh,
those
thank
are
you.
some of the first ones I saw,
Hmm.
and I made the logical analysis videos on them, and they're so hilarious because everybody's expecting you to be this kind of bumbling idiot, and then you show up and you completely demolish like these NASA physicists and it's just so funny because you're kind of an unassuming guy. You look at this unassuming nice guy,
Yeah.
but you're not just going to take it. You're there to give your information, and you
Yeah.
do it in a nice way. Like other people aren't as nice about it, but it's still absolutely hilarious. And I was just thinking I have to
Thanks.
make videos on this to point out, like, this is such a great topic to point out these logical fallacies. So all of the flat earth fans on Mindshock, even the ones that are, think you're a shill or whatever, they do have you to thank for a lot of the Mindshock coverage. So thanks
Oh,
again for that.
no, thank you. And yeah, kill him with kindness. We can't all be Nathan Oakley. Who just brutalizes people. Yeah, I've always been unassuming that way, and you're right. I kind of sneak up on you, where they again, they assume it's like, oh, no, I can sleepwalk through this and just crush him. It's
Yeah.
like, really? Can you? Because yeah, I don't think it's gonna be so easy. But I do love disarming people. That is one of my favorite things. And I'll tell you one quick story before I go, which is one of my I don't get intimidated much by interviews, but Piers Morgan, when he had an astronaut sitting right next to him on stage, that was one of my more intimidating things, and they blindsided me with that. It's like they didn't tell me till right then. It's like, oh, by the way, you're gonna have an astronaut sitting next to Piers, and I've heard Piers before, and Piers can be a real ass
Yeah.
sometimes, and I've heard him just harsh people to death. And after the first couple minutes, he couldn't have been nicer to me. To where, at the end, he's like, yeah, you be you and blah blah blah. But he was not condescending really that. I mean, yeah, he tried to start a fight between Terry and I, but that was natural. So
I have a
yeah, that
theory. I have a theory about him that he's just living his life as one giant Illuminati humiliation ritual. Just because, like
could be.
all these interviews, he's getting absolutely smoked. And I mean, maybe there's a couple where he makes good points, but a lot of the ones I've seen, like even the Andrew Tate ones, like some of them, he's getting annihilated. Like it's like he has the mental capacity of a small child, and he's getting thrashed, and he just keeps going. Like it's kind of hilarious.
Yeah, and he also puts on a new pair of socks every show,
Yeah.
just so you know. I watched him in the background, and it's like, what's he doing? Like brand new, out of the wrapper, a new pair of socks. Everyone's got their
I think
thing.
yeah, I think there's a lot of media personalities kind of like that where I mean I'm not joking. I actually think it's some kind of humiliation, just the stuff that they make them do. Like
Could be.
how could you look that stupid? Even you're getting paid a lot of money, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But where's your dignity? Like it's just kind of weird.
Yeah.
It's
And
kind of
and
weird.
and by the way, thank you for bringing up Andrew Tate because I love that he made that little clip where, he said all the flat earth stuff, on camera. I don't know if you ever saw that clip,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
it's,
I
it's
saw that one.
awesome. It's great. So more every day. Anything else I
Yeah.
can do for
Okay, awesome. No, this was a great talk. I think the Mindshock listeners will be very happy with this one because we
you?
touched
Okay.
upon, I mean, that's what I do. I go comprehensive and exhaustive on so many things. And a lot of people thought you wouldn't have answered a lot of the questions that I asked
I
you,
don't know.
which
Wow.
that was one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you because I was like, for some reason, I think Mark's going to answer all. I think he's going to disappoint a lot of these people who think that he's going to just like have a meltdown moment or run away and terminate the interview. So I
No.
was looking forward to asking you some of these questions that other personalities would have probably had a problem answering.
They want me to do like a Greta response, like, how dare you?
All right, well, we definitely got to do this again sometime.
Yeah, yeah, you just let me know. I'm more
Yeah,
than
awesome.
happy.
Thanks.
I
Yeah,
had
thanks
fun
so
and
much.
thank you for the unique experience of talking to an animated bear.
That is
That
actually me, so don't tell anybody what I
I
look like.
won't I won't tell anyone that you are a polar bear, I believe.
Interdimensional entity with a very interesting facial features. But
Boy, I
um
can't. Yeah.
the and so I do have permission to post this entire
Do
interview in
you have
entirety.
my permission to use anything that I do for anything you want?
Okay, thanks so much.
All right.
All right, take care, Mark.
Thank you. Have a good
Yeah,
one.
you too. Bye.
Bye.